I have with me today journalist Todd Bensman to go over what's going on at the southern border, what's going on now at the northern border, and some really juicy information about the United States government lying to the American people, sending hundreds of millions of dollars to get migrants into the country, and the secret battle between Joe Biden and President Obrador down in Mexico. Todd, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So I want to jump right in. I am reading and seeing that the U.S. federal government is giving hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to NGOs, non-government organizations, in order to basically give a more luxurious trip from around the world up through South and Central America, up through Mexico. What can you tell us about this story?
Well, it is true. It is absolutely true that the Biden administration, through the State Department and USAID, one of the big agencies that delivers humanitarian aid for using U.S. taxpayer, they are funneling probably historic levels of cash to UN agencies and who are running a huge endeavor in South America and Mexico, Latin America, Mexico, to aid and abet and make life easier, the travel easier, every human need met down there for migrants who are on the trail on the way in, so that and using probably about 248 NGOs that are international NGOs, local NGOs, but also a lot of American NGOs, non-governmental organizations is what I mean by that, including quite a few religious organizations that are well known to all of us, are down there doling out credit cards, using cash vouchers for things like hotel and transportation, handing out food, clothing, medical treatment, legal assistance, shelter of all kinds, really everything that you need to travel from very distant countries to our southern border is being provided along a very well-established, entrenched network of aid stations. I would just call them aid stations. And those aid stations are advertised for all to see, so that you know that if you run out of food, that you should account for so many days to get to the next one, and then the next one, all the way to the U.S. Border. Now, the United Nations is managing this. By and large, it's a public record. They don't hide it. You can find their budget document for 2024, calling for $1.6 billion to be handed out to 3 million immigrants all along the trail from South America, from the tip of South America all the way here. 372 million of that just in cash debit cards, tens of millions for what they call humanitarian transportation. They'll tell you that this is because they're coming anyway, so we're going to save them from suffering and death, provide a safety net. But there's another way to look at this also, and maybe it's more controversial, whatever, but there are people that look at this same aid and assistance as smuggling, as aiding and abetting this traffic that maybe a lot of people wouldn't even come were it not for the insurance policy that all their basic needs will be met along the way.
Okay, so President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are saying that the U.S. border is closed. They're doing everything they can to stop the flow of migrants. But then out of the other side of their mouth and out of the other pocket, they're giving hundreds of millions of dollars of our money to NGOs and also to the United Nations, and then they're funding the invasion of the United States of America.
That's it in a nutshell. That's definitely a reasonable way to interpret that. Like I said, others will interpret that in a different way, that they're coming anyway because they're fleeing death at home. And so, this is going to, save them suffering on the way. But the claim that the border is closed is objectively untrue. That is just simply not true. They are allowing into the country north of 85% of everybody who touches that border is allowed in, welcomed in. Within a day, they're on a bus or a plane to the city of their choice. 85% at a minimum. So that is the definition of an open border, that almost everybody who can get themselves to the border will then be let in, transported anywhere they want to go, and pretty much indefinitely, whatever you want to call their status, nobody is doing big deportations or roundups in the interior or detentions or anything like that. And the entire world of aspiring immigrants know this.
I'm blown away. I keep thinking about how little help we gave to our fellow citizens in Hawaii, and how we bend over backwards to help people from other countries that we don't know or owe anything to. It's just mind-boggling to me. Talk to my audience for a minute about this story, where now that it's out in the open that the border is a crisis, Democrats can't cover this up anymore. Republicans can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. The public knows what's going on. You're now saying that behind the scenes, there is immense pressure being put on President Obrador of Mexico, not Egypt. They're putting all this pressure on Mexico. I don't know anything about it. I'm learning this right now with my audience.
So probably most of your audience remembers that in November, October, November, December, we were seeing, 10,000 a day cross the border, 12,000 a day, and even 14,000 a day. And I think we had one day that was 15,000. It was absolutely beyond anything, even in the recent American experience, which had been beyond anything ever in American history by itself. So it's just one of those. That now is 4,000, 5,000, and 6,000 a day, which is still an unbelievable number. But it's not that 14,000 a day. The problem with the 14,000 a day, and it was a big problem, finally caught some attention and to be addressed, is that international media was covering this. They were getting video of these throngs of people just pouring in. I mean, everybody remembers this, right? It was just a few weeks ago, really. That was driving the Biden campaign poll numbers into the dirt, really damaging the political campaign of the incumbent. So they had to do something. Around December 22nd, the president himself went to Mexico City about the immigration problem, met with Obrador, came back. 5 days later, he sent Antony Blinken and Mayorkas down there for more high-level meetings. And at that exact time, Mexico began going what I say is medieval on the immigration coming from its south and through the country to our north. And what I mean by that is that on the northern parts of Mexico and the northern sections, you started to see mass roundups by the army, the Mexican army, and immigration with state police. Tens of thousands they rounded up and forced onto buses and airplanes and shipped them 1,500 miles south to the bottom of Mexico, back down there, and cleared all of these towns and cities on the north, especially in the towns and cities where there was media. So you can kind of understand what's going on here. They've got Mexico by proxy uh, doing really extreme things that even Donald Trump wouldn't have been able to try or do when he was in office. But they're doing this down in Mexico. I know this. I just came back from Mexico. I interviewed the Mexican troops, the police, the soldiers, the immigrants themselves who are running and hiding. I've never seen anything like that in the 3 years that I've been covering this crisis. My information is that the Mexicans are planning to continue this pressure until about November 2024.
Oh, I wonder what's happening then.
So it looks like they're in for the long haul. We'll see what happens. These things tend to, they don't really usually have much longevity. I was seeing Mexican army wheeling up semi-permanent mobile barracks all along the Mexican side of the riverbank across from Texas. That's new. When I asked them what their orders are, it's we got to round them up and ship them south. That's our orders. How long are you going to do this? Uh, and the answer is open-ended. We're not being told a date. So it looks like, and it's working. They've got roadblocks everywhere. They've been mowing down migrant camps on the northern border that have been there for years, digging anti-personnel, anti-pedestrian trenches in busy crossing spots. The biggest thing that they're doing, the Mexicans, by proxy from the Biden administration's diplomacy from December and January, is that they are blocking access to Mexico's freight train system. This was a huge development because those things were wide open. Anybody could get a free ride to any city on the border that they wanted on these freight trains. Now they're rousting immigrants out of the cars and off the tops by force, shipping them back south. I mean, it's really slowed down. It's still 5,000 and 6,000 a day, but it's not 14,000 a day. And under a certain threshold of numbers, the US media goes away. So they got it under that media go away threshold. And I think they're happy with that. And maybe the polls will start coming back up on that issue soon.
Yeah, maybe this is where Senator Lankford got that allow 5,000 into the country number.
It was coincidental, I thought.
Yeah, yeah. It's all so interesting. As you were speaking, Todd, I was thinking, okay, here they're like, okay, we've got to make this go away. And then they basically like hire a bunch of gangsters to like beat up people. And even though I'm irritated at the amount of money that the government's wasting and how many people are sneaking in, it brings me no joy to hear that these people are being harassed or injured or hurt or trafficked. That brings me no joy. And yet look at what's happening. They're just like, like beating these people up and forcing them back so that they can control the flow of number on behalf of Joe Biden. This reminds me of these crazy climate activists who, they put all this pressure on the United States, who creates relatively little pollution compared to China. And yet we ship all of the nasty jobs overseas so that we can feel better about it. But we're still causing all the pollution by the oil and the metals and the rare earth minerals and all of that. It's just out of sight, out of mind, right? And that's what's happening is Biden is going, wait a minute, I'm the most unpopular president in since World War II. I've got to clean up my image. Go beat up a bunch of immigrants. I mean, this is really pathetic stuff. So, but Mexico, they've got to do their part, and so that's really, kind of sad to hear. I wanted to go north for just a second because what I'm reading, I read some articles coming out of New York where while everyone's distracted on the Texas border crisis and the Arizona border crisis, that they're actually having the largest inflow of illegals coming in through the Canada northern border. Have you heard that? Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, I know quite a lot about that. I've studied about it. I've studied it and I've written about it. First of all, uh, yes, there is an influx there, but what the media is providing you are percentage increases, which sound horrendous, 240%, but 100% of 5 is 10. So the don't get too carried away with the percentages. The total numbers are just still absolutely minuscule. What a lot of the media wants you to do is like, don't, never mind that guy behind the curtains kind of a thing. Look over here. Um, that's what that is. There's not really that much of a crisis on the northern border. There's a spike. I'll tell you why there's a spike. There is a spike there. Follow me here. It's a little bit complicated, but just if you follow me, you'll get this right away. The Trudeau government of Canada has embarked for the last few years on a massive legal immigration program. They're bringing in about 500,000 a year from all over the world. It's a massive, it's the biggest legal immigration, purposeful legal immigration program in Canada's history. And the way it works is that Canada and the United States have an agreement where if people come into the US first, they cannot seek asylum in Canada. They can't cross the border and legitimately seek asylum in Canada most of the time. There's one loophole. And then there's the same thing with Canadians. So when people come into Canada, it's a safe country, it's a good country. You know, why would you want to then cross the southern border? But there's a loophole, and that is what is going on. The loophole is that if you show up in Canada and you have relatives inside the United States, you are allowed to loophole through that regulation, cross a bridge, cross any of the bridges, or even in between ports of entry, and claim asylum and say, I have relatives in the US, I need asylum to reunite with them. So what's happening is that you are seeing people taking advantage of Trudeau's program, knowing ahead of time that they have relatives in the US, but that if they just get flown into Canada, they can then cross the American border and we'll take them. That's what's happening. This is a product of somebody else's policies, and the two governments have not like gotten together to close that loophole up. It wouldn't take much to close that, to fix that, tweak that agreement. But I don't think the administration is either one of them. They're liberal governments that are interested in tweaking that. So you're going to start to see, we started to see this right when Trudeau began the program. People figured out, well, if I've got relatives, rather than come over the southern border, I'll let the Canadians fly me in, and then I'll walk over a bridge or just cross through the woods and tell them I got relatives in Newark or whatever, you know?
Yeah, wow, interesting. 5% of all my viewers are Canadian, so they'll want to know this information about Justin Trudeau.
And in the meantime, your Canadian viewers are probably well aware that your entire healthcare system is collapsing under the weight of this legal immigration thing, but that's another novel.
There's so many countries that are trying to import people. I saw a commercial yesterday. It was these two young schoolgirls with like braided hair. They must have been in elementary school, and they're like, "Come to Wales, come to Wales. We have jobs. You can come here." And my first thought was like, who are you inviting to come? And number two, why is your spokesperson a young little girl? Like, it made no sense to me. But you have these countries. Are these countries dying without new population influx? Is it their low birth rate?
They have labor needs. Clearly, they have labor needs. They want to grow their consumer markets, and that's fine. That's legal immigration. What's happening in the United States is not legal immigration. And that's a Grand Canyon size distinction that a lot of people just kind of gloss over. Canada would never allow, no country in the world would just allow completely unimpeded mass migration illegally over their borders, wherever they are. And they certainly would never do it on purpose. If they discovered it happening, they would move quickly to try to shore it up. And but the legal system it's a legal system, so go for it. The government has stamped and approved that. If you need labor, uh, bring them in legally, allow more people to come in legally. That is not what's happening at our southern border, where people just go, well, we needed the labor anyway. No country does that because all of those people are total strangers. I can go on the other side. I do it every time on the other side in Mexico and fill a grocery bag with discarded identification cards and passports. They throw them just before they come in so that they don't have to tell us who they are. They're hiding something, obviously, where they've been, something that would disqualify them from asylum. And you have criminals. You have also, you have people that war criminals and people who are potential terrorists. And that's why you don't have mass illegal immigration. You have legal immigration where they have to make an application and submit fingerprints and get interviewed and some level of getting to know you. Here we've just got 300,000 people named Mickey Mouse crossing the southern border without IDs, and then a day later they're in Chicago and New York.
You're not being facetious. That's a real thing.
Well, I'm being a little facetious about the name Mickey Mouse,
Okay,
but
but they're
I'm
just
just saying
using
that
fake names.
yeah, well, yeah, you could just say who make up a name. I mean, and they do. They just take the Border Patrol will write in whatever name you give them, Mickey Mouse, and then that's your name, from just like they used to at Ellis Island way back in the old days. Well, that name I can't pronounce it. Your name is Smith. You know,
They're like, your name is
or not.
Seeking Asylum. Okay, come on in. Uh,
Right?
one thing that I wanted to better understand, because I saw some mixed messaging on the internet about this, but I read some stories about how the Mexican cartels are taking over Indian reservations or infiltrating them or at least trafficking a lot of fentanyl through them. Do you know anything about this story?
Well, I just today published a piece in the Federalist about the
Okay.
Kickapoo tribe, which is just a little bit downriver from Eagle Pass, Texas, which is where Greg Abbott is making his big stand against the federal government, and that whole thing is happening there. And the Kickapoos have a very small reservation, it's about 120 acres. This piece is in the Federalist. And usually they get, onesies and twosies. They're kind of out in the boonies, and it was always easier to cross under the bridges at Eagle Pass than to have to go 10 miles downstream through the brush and all the rest of that. But things are kind of blocked up right now in Eagle Pass. And what we're seeing is a tremendous spike for that little reservation of illegal immigrants crossing through and giving themselves up to the Border Patrol. Now, the way that you even learn about this place as an easy place to cross and get in is going to be through smugglers that probably work for the cartel, local coyotes who say, okay, pay me $500 and I'll take you to where I know you're going to get in, the Kickapoo tribe over here. And that is happening. And undoubtedly, over the years, long before this, there's drug trafficking, I'm sure, that goes through. I mean, there's no fencing, there's no wiring, there's no really significant police presence on these reservations. There are some big reservations along the border in Arizona. There's some smaller ones in Texas, Indian lands in California too, I believe. Um, and I'm sure that a lot of cartel activity, a lot of drug activity goes on these reservations, and most definitely illegal immigration, people smuggling over these reservations as well. State and local police are not really allowed to go onto the reservations. The reservations do, my understanding is, have to accommodate Border Patrol, federal agents. And most of them have their own tribal police forces, but as I can't really speak to the integrity of tribal police forces in remote areas where there's gigantic money available.
Yeah. Wow. I have to say, and you're the first person that I've asked about a topic I didn't understand, and they said, "Oh, I wrote about that just today." So that was not planned, everybody. Literally, that I've never had that happen before.
It's,
Um,
it's the Kickapoo tribe in
yeah.
Texas and the Federalist. My piece is in the Federalist today.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. So, the last question that I want to know, and then I want to talk about your book Overrun, because you are a border expert, which is why I wanted you to come on. But what are your thoughts about the House of Representatives impeaching Mayorkas, Alejandro Mayorkas, first cabinet member impeached since like 1876 or something like that? I doubt the Senate is going to actually get him removed because the Democrats, seem to love the idea of illegals coming in because they'll probably vote for them. But that's a side story. Is there any good that comes from Mayorkas, or is this just a waste of time?
Well, he's not going to be removed. I don't see the numbers there for his removal, but I think, the House Republicans well understood that this was not going to end in a removal. And even if it did end in a removal, his replacement might well have been worse. So I mean, as long as the boss is still in the White House, that's not going to get you far. But what it does do is it provides a means to put the stick to an administration that is just obviously, blatantly disregarding congressional will, congressional statutes. Even the Supreme Court recently ruled in a case that had to do with the border. Without going into a lot of details about that case, they ruled that if the administration is kind of ignoring a bunch of the laws, that's not on us to decide. The Supreme Court doesn't have a place to decide. The way that Congress can enforce that is through these other means, such as impeachment. The Supreme Court ruling was you use impeachment if you don't like that they're not following the law. So I think in that respect, it's valuable because what else do you have to kind of what other stick do you have if not the Supreme Court? You have impeachment, you have the bully pulpit, you have elections and things like that. So I'm not entirely opposed to it. I wish that there was a better chance that he could have been removed, but he deserved impeachment, in my opinion, for whatever that's worth. This is a senior level law enforcement executive, the highest law enforcement executive in the land, really, head of DHS, who wittingly knows uh, that he is disregarding the Immigration and Nationality Act in full, like not really using any part of it. Its requirements for detention, its requirements for deportation. They don't, the language of the law, it's not up for interpretation. It says, thou shall deport immediately, and thou shall detain until they're deported, that sort of thing. And all sorts of everything else. And they're just making up a shadow parallel system that has the net effect of opening the borders completely to almost everybody who reaches it and allowing them in. So they are this guy is fully subverting the law. What else do you do? Except if you can't go to the Supreme Court, what else do you do? You bring articles of impeachment.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
And I still think it will. I don't think they'll get him out, but I still think it was good because we have an election coming up, and the one thing that they'll be able to say when people are running back home is this person voted to keep Alejandro Mayorkas in, who's let 10 million people into the country. This. So at least it gives them something to point back at. This person
And
kept this in.
And also, the House did a really good job at investigating and documenting what he did, what they've done. They've got a long series of reports that are published now that are really good, neutral. I know it's coming from a partisan place, but I mean, anybody could, historians will be able to study what happened here. And I will say that I'm cited quite a bit in those reports, so that makes them even more credible. But
That's great. Well, you are a fantastic writer and author. Tell us a little bit before we get out of here. Tell us a little bit about your book Overrun, and what people will learn by reading it.
sure, Overrun came out a little less than a year ago. It's about coming up on its 1 year anniversary. It is the only investigative book about this particular border crisis, how it got started, what the impacts of it are from a ground view perspective, from among the immigrants on the ground for 3 years. I've been down there, uh, and the book really just kind of lays out what happened here. This was the greatest mass migration crisis in U.S. history, and there's only one book about it so far, and this is that book. The book also goes into quite a lot of solution oriented suggestions and recommendations, like how do we get out of this thing. You can't find your way out of the box until you figure out how you got in the box. That's why fish traps work so well. This is kind of the anti-fish trap book. The book is available anywhere books are sold. It's Post Hill Press, Bombardier Books. It's in hardcover and paperback, and Amazon on the shelf anywhere you want. And there's an audio version too, which is kind of cool. My first book didn't get an audio version.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll link that down below. Thank you so much for coming on, all your research. I know you've been traveling like crazy. Folks, if you like this video, give it a like. If you like this information, the guests that I'm bringing to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. The more I grow, the bigger my guests are to have experts like this. Todd Bensman, thank you so much for coming on. I'll leave those links down below, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.